So I'd like to get back to the nuts and bolts of this a little bit. I'm looking at a map of a city that's 115 square kilometers. I'm looking at a map of a city that is really somewhere, around 100 5-minute walkable catchment areas. And there's 92 elementary schools, 18 secondary schools, 24 community centers. There's libraries, there's BIAs, there's civic theaters. There's all of these different things that are all happening someplace. And it's, again, really important that this process be reflective of the nuances of those places at a granular level. So as we consider the consultation process, to me, we have to keep our eyes firmly on the prize, which is how are we planning for those places going forward, and how are we gathering the voices? Because ultimately, as representatives, this is about popular control. We are elected to represent people, so we need to know what they think. So the question for us is, how do we know what people think in each one of those neighborhoods now? And one of the things that has come up a couple of times is the notion of a ward system, which is something that's been debated over the years. And that just sort of piqued my thinking about, if we reduce it to 50 neighborhoods, which some of my research has taken us to, could we not say we've got 10 councillors, that each councillor could have 5 sub-neighborhoods that they could be intersecting with and having conversations directly with? Because, again, we are the elected representatives. We should be hearing from the people directly. So that was just an innovation, I thought, maybe, that we could explore, is some more direct contact between councillors and neighborhoods. But then the question, of course, is how do we divvy up the neighborhoods and who talks to who? But that's something I think we could explore.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, still, I will come back that we are making land use decisions. And so therefore, the land use of is affecting the people that live in those neighborhoods. The two need to be quite integrally intertwined, notwithstanding the larger discussions around values. So you're likely familiar with the IAP2, or International Association for Public Participation, spectrum of public impact. And that is inform, consult, involve, collaborate, empower. So I think in whatever undertaking that we take, whether we're dealing with people in person or online, we need to be looking at that spectrum as having an important role to play in the way that we are gathering feedback and engaging with people. Because we're not just gathering the feedback, we want to be in a dialogue. And we want to ultimately be empowering people, especially in addressing the lack of trust.
Yep.
And trust brings me to the overarching question of transparency. People need to see that their feedback is having an impact, because I hear over and over and over again, sure, we went out and we consulted, we listened, and then it doesn't have any kind of impact on the outcomes. So I think transparency should be emphasized as a key element of establishing greater trust in the public consultation process. So in person, again, I'm looking at the number of people we've got. I'm estimating right now around 640,000 people living in Vancouver. Well, back in the 90s, 25 years ago, 100,000 Vancouverites participated pre-internet. So that was public meetings, that was in the schools, that was in the community centers. It was every possible way that we could think of. So as we consider each of the neighborhoods, we should be considering, okay, where's the elementary school? Where's the park? Where's the library? Where are all of the ways, the BIAs, that we can be interacting with people, and make a list of all of the different ways, but informed by location, because they're all different, of where we can be reaching people and gathering feedback and engaging in dialogue across the city. As well, I think the question of different techniques came up You know, we can always grab, you know, things like polls, but people, often there's sort of emotional knee-jerkism into the simplicity of polls, and we need to be able to gather feedback in a more fulsome way from people. And techniques like the design charrette that you've brought up there, I think it was Councillor Carr that touched on that. Design charrettes are a terrific way, and the idea of a charrette in the box is great, but that's a charrette in the box that needs to be duplicated 50 or 100 times at a neighborhood level. And that brings me to the staff interface on that. And the staff interface, there used to be community planning, where there were planners in the planning department that had responsibilities for different neighborhoods or local areas. And that was certainly at play when the last city plan was done, and the proposed vision areas. I think the terms of reference were distributed to council. There's a map in there that you'll find interesting. In order to be able to have an ongoing dialogue, and not just a one-shot deal, but an ongoing dialogue within the neighborhoods, it's important to be able to communicate back and have some, you know, individuals within the planning department and other departments on an ongoing basis that have those relationships and that hyper-local knowledge.
Interesting.
The key elements in establishing a legitimate process, popular control, considered judgment. People need to know what to be informed and educated so that the feedback that they contribute is constructive. Transparency for building trust. Inclusiveness or inclusivity, I think, is a theme that everyone is in agreement and alignment on. Efficiency. Efficiency is something that we haven't really talked about. If we want to go out and consult with 100,000 plus people or hundreds of thousands of people, how are we going to do that efficiently in a way that is going to really inform the process? Because there are the nuts and bolts of it.
Yep.
Trying to wind up, and these things apply themselves both to in-person, offline, and online processes. I think it's also important, even though we're talking about social media here and we're talking about different kinds of technology that are being used to gather things, that the same principles of authenticity apply. I think we've all been aware of what's gone on with social media, with the Cambridge Analyticas and the other online manipulations that have occurred. And also to speak to Councillor Fry's comments about the loudest voices. Often those loudest voices are on Twitter, being rather unpleasant because of anonymity. So I think that it's important, even though we want to get the word out as broadly as possible, and to your point, Councillor DiGenova, advertising, informing, getting it out there is important. But I think to make this a legitimate process, we have to at the same time really know that we are dealing with the people of Vancouver, where they live, in such a way that they are going to trust our process going forward.
That's key, absolutely. And all those things you mentioned, those metrics, help to build that trust little by little. Because they start off, I think you normally start off with a deficit in all local government. It's just the moods that people are in, you know?
Well, it's a global problem, but why even bother getting involved if it's only a waste of my time, no one's listening, it's not going to have any impact on the outcome?
You really have to do a lot of work to break that cynicism. That's right.
Absolutely.
Yep. Well stated.